But back to this one-woman show, born gifted and need help. I think we should all welcome right now to the stage Dorothy Kirk.
Thank you. I was lucky when I grew up. I had 6 parents. I had 6 parents, 2 of whom, of course, were Mom and Daddy. But I also had my mother's older sister, Virgie, and her husband, Bill. And 2 women that lived down the street, they were sisters. Mrs. Butcher for short is what we called her, and her sister Louise. They had both been married in the past, but were now older. Butcher's husband had been killed in World War I, and Louise's husband had died. Neither my Aunt Virgie or Uncle Bill or Butcher and Louise had children. So I was, in effect, their daughter, and they viewed me as their daughter, and taught me all the lessons of life, gave me all kinds of guidance, tried to discipline me, tell me the correct way to live, and raised me up to be a good person. And it was, you know, we lived all within a 1.5 block area. Butcher and Louise lived 1 house away, my aunt just around the corner. So I was in and out of their houses all the time. During the summer, I ate at my aunt's every day for lunch. I'd go over there at night and watch television. The same with Butcher and Louise, or they'd be at our house. We could not have Christmas and go into the living room to see what Santa Claus brought us until all 6 were present. And then we could go and see what Santa Claus was. That's how much a part of the family they were. I got a lot of lessons from them, and they were all, sometimes they were very benign cultural things, like children should be seen, not heard. And sometimes they were contradictory lessons. One set would tell me one thing, one said another. Miss Butcher focused on 2 areas, her lessons of life. One were the very practical things. The first thing she taught me, for which I will always be grateful, is she taught me how to cook. And cooking was very important to her. And she would say to me, Dottie Jean, that's what they call me, Dottie Jean, you will never get a husband if you don't learn how to cook. And she told me the story of how when she was 10 years old, her mother was sick, and she had to start cooking for the family. And she told me the story about how she brought a stool over to put up so she could reach the counter so she could make biscuits. She gave me a little plaque, and I had it for years and kept it in my kitchen until it finally just wore out. It was a plaque with a Pennsylvania Dutch couple on it, leaning forward toward each other and kissing. And the plaque said, "Kissing don't last, cooking do." So that was kind of her philosophy of life. She also had another area she focused on, and I think that's because she was our babysitter when Mama and Daddy worked, so she kept my brother and I. And she was so afraid that we would die on her watch. Most of her other lessons had to do with making sure that that didn't happen. So we couldn't climb trees, of course. We couldn't ride our bicycle in the street. And then she taught me all kinds of things, like never, ever pet a strange dog, you know, because he's probably a mad dog. When you get up in the morning and put your shoes on, always shake them out first because there might be a brown recluse spider in there. And all kinds of lessons like that that were geared around avoiding death. Now, one lesson she taught me, though, her strictest rule, actually had I followed it, it probably would have killed me. But somehow I knew that this was a crazy rule, and I could just kind of ignore it. And that was, it was dangerous to drink too much water. So in the summer, for example, I'd come running in from playing outside. I'd be hot, I'd be sweaty. The first thing I'd be headed for is the kitchen sink so I could get some water. And I'd hear Butcher, she'd say, Dottie Jean, how many times do I have to tell you, don't drink so much water. Don't you know drinking water is going to kill you? And I learned later that she thought that because she had known a man, an elderly man though, who'd come in from working all day in his garden, hot and sweaty. He had consumed a large glass of cool water and fell over dead. So that was her. In fact, for every warning she gave me, brown recluse spiders, mad dogs, avoid pigeons because if they shit on you, they carry a disease called psittacosis. She knew somebody who had been killed by this or had contracted this strange disease. In fact, one time I was in Savannah and a pigeon did shit on me. And I had to rush to the nearest ski shop store and buy a new shirt so that I didn't have to. I was terrified I might get psittacosis. Anyway, not drinking water, though, was something she carried to a level of a virtue. In other words, she was refined and disciplined because she didn't need more than half a glass of water a day. And if she didn't need more than half a glass of water a day, then by God, nobody else did either. And to drink more than half a glass of water a day was just indulgence. So now, she would tell me, Dottie Jean, you don't need more than half a glass of water a day. That's sufficient. Now, what she neglected to take into account was the fact she started the day with several cups of coffee, lots of sweetened iced tea at lunch. She was very fond of Pepsi Colas, which she drank a lot of. And then there was that little secret. That was Miss Butcher's recreational use of Alka-Seltzer. And several times a day, it was plop, plop, fizz, fizz, all in a tall glass of H2O. But, none of that counted for it. Pure water, unadulterated by cola, caffeine, or sugar, no, that was to be avoided. Now, as strange as this sounds, I'm not the only child in history to have ever been taught not to drink water. St. Monica, who was St. Augustine's mother, she had a nurse, a babysitter, say, who taught her not to drink water. She said to St. Monica, she said, now you drink water, but when you're in the mistress of the house, you're going to turn to drinking wine because you're going to have the keys to the wine cellar. Better not to get used to drinking anything. Just avoid the habit. So imagine a direct line of instruction from St. Monica to St. Augustine, on down somehow to Miss Butcher. To me. Now, Miss Butcher got sick when I was in my 30s and was in the hospital. I was living in Atlanta, and it wasn't thought to be life-threatening. But I drove up to North Carolina to see her anyway and went to the hospital. And I got there about lunchtime. Her sister Louise was sitting there, and they brought Butcher's lunch in. And she kind of picked over the food. She was finished, and there was a big, tall pitcher of water there on her tray. And I said, Butcher, I said, would you like a glass of water? And she looked at me so sweetly and smiled and said, yes. So I poured her a glass of water, and I helped her drink it. I held it up to her because she was kind of old and frail. And she drank that entire glass of water. After she finished, she said, well, Butcher, are you still thirsty? Would you like another glass? Again, she smiled at me so sweetly and said, yes. So I poured her a second glass of water, which she drank. And this time, incredulously, I asked, Butcher, are you still thirsty? Do you want another glass of water? And she smiled and said, yes. And I looked at her sister, Louise, and we just kind of were dumbfounded. But I poured her another glass of water, and she drank it down. And I left and said goodbye and went back to Atlanta. Miss Butcher died the next day. I'm convinced it was the water. The next story is my Aunt Virgie was my mother's older sister. And my aunt always had a bit of inferiority complex. She felt my mother was more beautiful. And of course my mother had a lovelier name, and she was stuck with Virgie. Now Virgie wasn't her real name, it was Virginia. But somehow she got stuck with Virgie, and she hated it. She thought it was ugly. She wanted a pretty name. So she asked me and my brother to call her Ginger. Well, my aunt on my father's side, my father's sister, had a horse named Ginger. And I said, no, we can't call you Ginger. Ginger's a horse's name. So we stuck with Virgie. But she taught me all the values of life, all the important lessons of life I learned from her. And she was a storyteller, too. She told the character stories in Sunday school and Bible school, and those are those stories that teach and impart values. So, and she and her husband also taught me how to have a good time. If it weren't for them, my childhood would not have had much fun in it, because Mama and Daddy worked all the time. So we would go to the drive-in every weekend, and my aunt would pack a picnic for us to go eat and have a good time. And it was a 1948 Chevrolet. It was before seat belts and child seats. And my uncle built a little padded box for me to sit on and a cushion so that it raised me up to their level. And we were eye to eye, like three peers there watching the movie. And we would always have a good time. We'd go to the mountains. We'd go here. We'd go there. And so we had a good time with them. And so they taught me she taught me how to have a good time, and she also taught me how to treat people and how important it was. Her highest value was never, ever hurt anybody's feelings. That was to be avoided. We didn't do that. And her story to illustrate that is she and Bill went over to have dinner one night with a woman from the church, Mrs. Brown, I'll call her. And my aunt was delighted to be going because, in all truth, my aunt was a little bit finicky about germs and dirt and cleanliness. I have a few bathroom stories I'll tell you about what an ordeal it was to go to a public bathroom with her, but she was very concerned about cleanliness. But Mrs. Brown had a reputation for keeping a fastidious house and very clean, and she was also a great cook, so my aunt knew that she could relax and enjoy it. So she told me the story. They got there and they were at the dinner table, and Mrs. Brown had baked biscuits and passed them around, and Virgie got a biscuit and she opened it up, getting ready to butter it, and she noticed in the middle of the biscuit was a hair. And she said, "Oh, Dottie Jean, I just could not eat that biscuit. I just couldn't, but I couldn't let Mrs. Brown know that she baked a biscuit with a hair in it. What was I going to do?" So she said she spent the entire meal trying to take that biscuit bit by bit off of the saucer, off of the table and into her pocket, so that Mrs. Brown would not know that she had been served a hairy biscuit. So that was the care she took of other people's feelings. And so I paid a lot of attention to all the lessons she taught me. And one was a weekend that I went to spend the night with her because my uncle went deep sea fishing, and my brother and I always competed to see who would get to spend the night with her because we always had such a good time. Pop popcorn, stayed up late, watched wrestling on television, all those things. So this time I was spending the night with her, and I got up on Sunday morning, and we were in her kitchen getting ready to go to church. And I was about 10 years old. And she said, "Dottie Jean," she said, "I want you to sit down. I got something really important to talk to you about." And I thought, oh my God, it's finally going to be the facts of life. She's going to tell me something. I'd heard a lot of talk, things about putting bananas in fruit bowls and cars going in and out of garages, and I was very confused over exactly what the facts of life were. So I thought, surely now I would get from my aunt, I'd get the lowdown. So she said, "Dottie Jean, you know your mother has a beautiful bosom." She said, "And I know that when you grow up, you want to have a really good bosom too." She said, "And the way to do that," she said, "is you have to have a good bra." She said, "The secret is to always, always buy a good bra. A bra is not anything that you can skimp on. You have to invest and buy a good bra." And she said, "And Dottie Jean, if you ever find yourself in life not being able to afford a good bra, I want you to come to me because I will loan you the money. It's just that important." So I was a shy, quiet child, so I just took it all in, and I thought, okay. And then as I got to the point where I started needing, I was a couple years away from needing to wear a bra, I realized she had left out an important fact, important thing. How do I know whether it's a good bra or not? What's the criteria for a good bra? So I have spent my life on the quest for a good bra. Is a good bra one with underwired or not? Front closure, back closure? The straps matter? Does the material matter? What is it? I probably have right now at home, I probably have about 50 bras in my drawers because I'm still on that quest because they come out with new bras all the time. I read recently there's something called a shelf bra, which is really something. And then a friend of mine knew that I had this quest, and some years ago, she gave me, just kind of as a joke, she gave me a nippleless bra. Now, I've told this story to some of my friends, and they said, "Dottie Jean, what in the world is a nippleless bra?" So in case you don't know, I brought one here today, and it's there where you have two holes that you can just have the nipples go through. So, now, I am pretty sure that would not meet Aunt Virgie's criteria for a good bra. The only thing I know about her criteria about a bra is that it would have to be damned expensive if she thought I was going to have to borrow money from her to buy one. And I do have a footnote. I call that story, Every Woman Has a Bra Story. In fact, I've told it to women, and most women do have a bra story. I mentioned it to my cousin Andy, and he said, "Oh, Dottie Jean," he said, "every guy has a bra story too." He said, "and ours are so much better than yours."